There's a silence in this house that's louder than any argument we ever had. It's the silence of the cold, undisturbed sheets on the other side of our king-sized bed, a space I haven't felt the warmth of another human being in for 732 nights. It's the silence of the coffee maker gurgling to a finish in the kitchen, a sound that has become my only morning companion. It's the silence of two people moving through a shared space like ghosts, our paths choreographed by years of practice to avoid collision, to avoid contact, to avoid the excruciating possibility of a glance. He's here, but he's not. My husband, Michael, still lives in this house that we built together, a house filled with the echoes of a life that feels like it belonged to someone else. He sleeps in the guest room at the end of the hall, the one we painted a soft blue for his mother when she'd visit. The door is always closed. He still mows the lawn into perfect, diagonal stripes every Saturday morning and takes the trash and recycling bins to the curb on Tuesday nights without fail. He is a phantom of routine, a specter of responsibility. To our neighbors here in this quiet, tree-lined corner of Austin, the ones we've shared holidays and block parties with for over a decade, we are still the Millers, the stable ones, the couple whose kids are polite, whose lawn is always green, the ones who made it. They see his car in the driveway, they see my lights on at night, they see the facade, the sturdy brick exterior of our home, and they assume the foundation is still strong. They don't see the cracks that run through every room, the rot that has set into the beams. He won't look at me. Not really. He'll look at a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. He'll look at the television, at his phone, at the contents of the refrigerator. His eyes will skate over my existence as if I'm made of glass. It's been 732 days since his gaze has rested on me with any kind of recognition, any flicker of the life we shared. I count every single one of them. It's a strange, unending kind of grief, to be so profoundly lonely while mourning someone who is still alive, someone who hands you the mail and asks if you need anything from the store. It wasn't always like this. Sometimes I have to physically hold on to a memory just to convince myself it was real. God, it feels like a dream I had long ago, but it was my life. For 17 years, our life was the kind of comfortable, beautiful story you read about, the kind you see in a Pottery Barn catalog and think, no one's life is really that perfect. But ours felt like it was. It truly did. We met at the University of Texas. I was a sophomore, buried in books in the PCL library, and he was the charming, goofy guy in my economics class who sat behind me and made terrible jokes about supply and demand. He had this easy smile that seemed to light up the entire lecture hall, and a laugh that was so genuine it was impossible not to join in. I was the serious, organized one, the one with color-coded notes who actually made sure we passed the midterms. We were that perfect cinematic cliché, the free spirit and the anchor, opposites who didn't just attract, but completed each other. Our first date was at a hole-in-the-wall barbecue joint on the outskirts of the city. He made me laugh so hard that sweet tea came out of my nose. I was mortified. He said it was the moment he knew he was going to marry me. We were kids, fueled by dreams and cheap beer, and the arrogant belief that nothing bad could ever happen to us because we had found each other. Our first home was a tiny, run-down fixer-upper in a neighborhood that was charitably called Up and Coming. It had peeling paint and a plumbing system that rattled like a ghost was trapped in the walls. We poured every ounce of our sweat and our meager savings into that little house. I remember so clearly one Saturday, we were both covered in drywall dust, exhausted and broke, and he pulled me into his arms in the middle of our demolished living room and promised me that one day He'd build me my dream house, with a wraparound porch and a kitchen big enough to dance in. And he did. This house, this is our dream house. The one we designed on napkins and talked about late into the night. 4 bedrooms, a sprawling backyard where the kids grew up, a deep porch swing where we used to sit, his arm around me and watch the magnificent Texas summer storms roll in across the sky. Michael could fix anything. A leaky faucet, a sputtering engine, a broken fence, my bruised heart after a fight with my sister. He was the guy you called. He was the answer. Our weekends were a beautiful, chaotic blur of life. Trips to Home Depot where he'd patiently explain the difference between screws and bolts. Afternoons spent under the blistering sun at high school football games for our son, Josh, cheering until our throats were raw. Evenings in stuffy auditoriums watching our daughter, Emily, in her dance recitals, his face glowing with a pride that was almost blinding. We were a team. He was the dreamer, the sails of our ship. I was the planner, the rudder that kept us on course. When his father passed away from a sudden heart attack, it was my shoulder he cried on for an entire night, his body racked with a grief so profound I thought it might break him. I just held him and let him be broken, knowing I was strong enough for both of us. When I was laid off from my marketing job during the 2008 recession, I fell apart. He was the one who held me together, whispering, "We'll figure it out, Sarah. We always do." And we always, always did. We were the couple our friends came to for advice. How do you guys still look at each other like that? My best friend Laura would ask as we'd watch him from the kitchen window, grilling burgers in our backyard, the kids running wild, chasing fireflies at dusk. And later that night, Michael would wrap his arm around my waist, pull me close in the quiet of our room and say, "I just got lucky." I believed him. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. After 17 years, the love wasn't the fiery, all-consuming passion it was in the beginning. It had settled, ripened into something deeper, richer, more nourishing. It was the love of knowing exactly how he liked his coffee without asking. The love of him wordlessly handing me a blanket when I fell asleep on the couch watching a movie. It was the love of shared history, of inside jokes that no one else would ever understand, of 17 chaotic Thanksgivings and Christmases spent with family. It was a foundation I thought was carved from granite. I never, not for a single second, imagined that rock was actually just sand, waiting for a single rogue wave to wash it all away. The change was insidious. It was a slow fade, not a sudden switch. It happened so gradually that I almost didn't notice it. Or, if I'm being honest with myself now, maybe I noticed it, but I chose not to see it. It's easier to ignore a tiny crack in the wall than to face the fact that the entire foundation might be compromised. It started about 3 years ago, maybe a little longer. The pressures at his architecture firm were immense. They had landed a massive new contract to design a skyscraper downtown, a career-defining project. He was the lead. He started working later, his days bleeding into his nights. He'd come home exhausted, the vibrant energy that always surrounded him dimmed to a low flicker. His body was home, but his mind was a million miles away, lost in blueprints and zoning codes. The easy laughter that used to be the soundtrack of our house was replaced by the constant, low-grade tapping of his fingers on his laptop keyboard. "How was your day?" I'd ask, trying to connect. "Fine," he'd say, his eyes never leaving the bright glare of the screen. "Just a lot." Our weekends, once our sacred family time, began to change. The projects around the house were left undone. The porch swing sat motionless, collecting dust and leaves. He was more irritable, his patience worn thin. He'd snap at the kids for leaving their shoes in the hallway, or at me, over things so ridiculously small it was absurd. The way I loaded the dishwasher, the brand of coffee I bought. It was like living with a man who had a low-grade fever all the time. Everything was an irritation. I told myself it was just the stress. Every marriage has its seasons, right? This was just a winter we had to get through. He was under immense pressure. I needed to be stronger, more supportive, more understanding. I took on more with the kids, more with the house, trying to create a peaceful sanctuary for him to come home to, trying to lighten his load. I thought I was being a good wife, a partner. I thought I was holding the line. Then, a new name started to thread its way into the sparse stories he told about work. Jessica, a new, brilliant, young project manager they'd hired straight out of grad school. Jessica found a workaround for the zoning issue. She's a lifesaver. Jessica and I had to pull an all-nighter to get the final proposal ready for the clients. He spoke of her with a kind of bright, sharp energy I hadn't seen from him in years. It was the energy he used to have when he talked about us. A tiny, ugly knot of suspicion began to form in the pit of my stomach. It felt foreign and shameful. I tried to crush it, to reason it away. This was Michael. My Michael. The man who had spent an entire 3-day weekend building an elaborate treehouse for Emily because she'd seen one in a movie and her eyes had lit up. The man who held my hand through 14 hours of labor with Josh, telling me I was the strongest person he'd ever known. He wasn't that guy. The guy from the movies, the cliché. He wouldn't. He couldn't. So I smiled, and I nodded. I told him I was so glad he had such a great, supportive team at work. I asked questions about Jessica, trying to make her a real person, not a shadowy threat. He said she was great, smart, a real go-getter, and I accepted it. How do you know when you're being a supportive, trusting partner versus when you're just being a blind fool? Is there a line that gets crossed? Or do you just wake up one day and realize you've been standing on the wrong side of it for a very long time? I still ask myself that every single day. The night my world shattered was an ordinary Thursday in April. He was supposed to be at a team dinner at a steakhouse downtown to celebrate a major project milestone. He was in a good mood when he left, kissing me goodbye, a quick, distracted peck on the cheek. He said he'd be home by 10, 11 at the latest. At 10:30, I sent a casual text. Hey, everything okay? Having fun? I busied myself, folding laundry, watching a show I wasn't paying attention to. The check mark on the message stayed a single gray tick. Not delivered. At 11, I called. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. That ugly knot in my stomach was back, and this time it wasn't a suspicion. It was a cold, hard stone of dread. I tried to rationalize it. His phone probably died. It was loud in the restaurant. They probably went out for another drink afterwards to continue the celebration. Perfectly plausible excuses. But I knew. In that deep, silent, ancient part of a woman's soul that knows things without proof, I knew. I sat on our bed, the bed we had picked out together at a furniture store years ago, arguing playfully over firmness, and I stared at the red glow of the digital clock on the nightstand. 11:17, 11:34, 11:52. Each minute that ticked by was a small eternity, a tiny hammer chipping away at the foundation of my life. I thought about calling Laura. I thought about calling his best friend. But what would I say? My husband is a little late coming home from a work dinner and I'm losing my mind. I felt insane. He finally walked through the door at 2:13 a.m. I heard the telltale creak of the floorboard in the hallway, a sound I'd heard thousands of times. He was trying to be quiet, tiptoeing like a teenager sneaking in after curfew. He smelled of expensive wine and a perfume that wasn't mine. It was a cloying, sweet floral scent, a world away from the clean, subtle fragrance I always wore. "Hey," I said from the darkness of our bedroom. My voice was thin, shaky. "You're late." He jumped, his silhouette frozen in the doorway. He was completely startled. He couldn't or wouldn't meet my eyes. "Oh, Sarah, sorry. I didn't want to wake you. It ran late. We were celebrating, and you know how it is." He started unbuttoning his shirt, keeping his back to me, a deliberate, defensive posture. "I called," I said softly, the words barely a whisper. "Your phone went to voicemail." "Oh, right. Yeah, my phone died. Totally dead. Sorry, babe." It was the babe that broke me. It was so normal, so casual. A word of affection he'd used 1,000 times, now being weaponized to cover a lie so enormous it was sucking all the oxygen out of the room. I didn't say anything else. I couldn't. The words were trapped behind a wall of shock and nausea. I just turned over, my back to him, and pretended to be asleep, my body rigid, my eyes squeezed shut against the hot tears that were threatening to fall. The silence that night was different from all the others. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy and sharp, and it was the sound of a 17-year-old promise being broken. It was the beginning of the end. The truth has a funny way of coming out. It doesn't always explode into the light in a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it just quietly bleeds out, a slow, dark stain that seeps into every corner of your life until you can no longer ignore it. For a week, we lived the lie. We were a hideous parody of ourselves, a masterclass in denial. We moved through our routines, our conversations as thin and fragile as tracing paper. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught in a loop of replaying that night over and over, searching his face for clues, for a flicker of guilt, for something tangible to hold on to. And then I found it. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week later. I was doing laundry, the most mundane of household chores. I was gathering his clothes from the hamper, a task I had done thousands of times. I picked up his suit jacket from that night, the one he'd tossed on a chair. It felt heavier than it should. I reached into the inside pocket, and my fingers brushed against a piece of crisp, folded paper. A receipt. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I unfolded it, my hands shaking so hard I could barely read the words. It wasn't for the steakhouse. It was from the Hotel Van Zant, a chic, expensive boutique hotel downtown. A room for two. Checked in at 9:45 p.m. on Thursday, April 12th. Checked out, well, there was no checkout time listed. And at the bottom, the final brutal confirmation, paid with our joint credit card. I stood there in our sun-drenched laundry room, the smell of clean linen and fabric softener all around me, holding a small piece of paper that had just detonated our entire life. The buzzing in my ears was so loud I thought I might faint. I walked out of the laundry room, down the familiar hallway past the photos of our smiling children, and into his home office. He was on a conference call, his back to the door, talking about quarterly projections. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I just walked up to his desk and placed the receipt on the polished wood surface directly in front of him, next to his keyboard. He stopped talking mid-sentence. He looked down at the receipt. He looked up at my face, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the mask of the busy, stressed husband fell away. There was no excuse left, no plausible lie to invent. There was just raw, animal panic in his eyes. He quickly mumbled something to his call and hung up. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my entire life.
"Sarah," he started, his voice a choked, broken whisper. "Don't," I said. My own voice sounded alien to me. It was flat, cold, dead. Just, don't. And then he did the one thing I had never, ever been prepared for. He completely fell apart. He didn't just cry, he collapsed into his expensive leather office chair and sobbed, his head in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with a grief that seemed to come from the very core of his being. It wasn't the reaction I had braced myself for. I was ready for anger, for denial, for him to try and turn it around on me. I wasn't ready for this complete and utter disintegration of the man I knew. He told me everything, the words tumbling out between sobs, a messy, ugly confession. It had been going on for 6 months. It started as lunches to talk strategy, then drinks after work. He said he felt unseen at home, taken for granted. He said the pressure at work was killing him, and Jessica, she made him feel seen. She admired him. She made him feel like the hero again, not just the guy who takes out the trash. He swore it was a mistake, a terrible, colossal mistake, the biggest of his life. He said he'd already ended it that morning, that he'd do anything, quit his job, go to therapy, move to another state, whatever it took to fix what he had broken. I listened. I heard the words, mistake, and sorry, and I love you, only you. But all I could see was that hotel receipt, the clinical black and white letters. All I could feel was the naive, unconditional trust I had placed in this man for 17 years, now curdled into a bitter poison in my stomach. What are you supposed to do when the person who is sworn to protect your heart is the one who wields the knife that stabs it? That night, he gathered a pillow and a blanket and moved into the guest room. He said it was out of respect for me, to give me the space I needed. But it felt like a border being drawn in the sand, a stark, physical manifestation of the chasm that had just opened between us. Our home was no longer a shared territory. It was now 2 separate nations, the republic of his overwhelming guilt and the desolate wasteland of my pain. We tried. God, we really, truly tried. We went to couples counseling. We sat on a generic, neutral-colored sofa in a quiet office and talked to a kind-faced woman named Dr. Evans about our communication styles and our love languages. It felt like learning a foreign language in a country that had already been burned to the ground. She gave us homework, exercises designed to rebuild intimacy. Take 10 minutes every day, she instructed us gently, to sit facing each other, hold hands, and share one thing you appreciate about the other person. The first time we tried it, we sat on the edge of our bed, our knees almost touching. He looked at me, his eyes swimming with a desperate, pleading shame. I appreciate that you're still here, he whispered, his voice cracking, that you haven't walked out. I just stared back at him, my heart a block of solid ice. My mind was a complete blank. Appreciate? I couldn't think of a single thing. The 10 minutes of silence that followed were more excruciating and damaging than any screaming match could have ever been. We tried for the kids. We put on our happy family masks for dinners, for their school events, for parent-teacher conferences. We'd stand side by side on the sidelines at Josh's football games, cheering for our son. And for a fleeting moment, I could almost pretend everything was normal. But then I'd feel the careful, measured distance between our shoulders, a 6-inch gap that felt like the Grand Canyon. The kids weren't stupid. They were barometers of the emotional climate in our home. They felt the chill, the thick, unspoken tension. Is Dad mad at you? Emily asked me one night as I tucked her in, her 9-year-old eyes wide with a worry no child should have to carry. No, honey, I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He's just really, really tired from work. Lying became my second language. I became fluent in the art of pretending. Michael, to his credit, kept his initial promises. He cut off all contact with Jessica. She left the firm a month later. He changed his work hours, ensuring he was home for dinner every single night. He tried to engage, to fix things, to rebuild the house he had set on fire. He would leave me little notes, like he used to when we were first dating. He would try to hold my hand in the car. But it was like touching a ghost. His touch didn't feel like love anymore. It felt like penance. The man I loved was gone, and in his place was this stranger, this penitent, whose every kind gesture felt like a desperate apology. And every apology was just another screaming reminder of the betrayal. I wanted to forgive him. I truly did. I knew it was the only path forward. For my own sanity, for our family. I prayed for it. I read books about it. But forgiveness is a complicated, slippery thing. It's not a switch you can just flip. It's not a decision you make once. It's a decision you have to make every single minute of every single day. And I kept failing. How do you forgive someone when the evidence of their betrayal is sleeping in the room down the hall? How do you let go of the pain when the person who caused it is a constant, living, breathing reminder of it? I felt like I was drowning, and he was the water all around me. It's been 2 years since that day, 2 years of living with a ghost in a house of memories. And somewhere along that long, painful road, his desperate, frantic attempts to fix us stopped. The pleading in his eyes was replaced by a quiet, hollow resignation. The notes stopped appearing on my pillow. He stopped reaching for my hand in the car. The raw, open shame hardened into a permanent, settled sadness. And that sadness, over many more months of silence, eventually evaporated into the polite, empty distance we live in now. He gave up trying to reach me. The wall I had built around my heart to protect myself from more pain was too high, too thick. He couldn't get through. And now I think he's just accepted it. He functions. He's a good father to our children. He's a good, responsible provider. He's a quiet, courteous, and utterly heartbreaking roommate. But he won't look at me. That's the final, quiet punishment. The one that endures. It's not anger anymore. I think I could have handled anger. Anger is an emotion. It's a connection, in a twisted, painful way. This is infinitely worse. This is indifference. This is the look of a man who has finally accepted that the woman he loved is gone, and he doesn't know, and no longer has the energy to try and know, the stranger who is left in her place. Me. He destroyed our marriage in a single night of selfish choices, but I think I'm the one who buried it, suffocating it under the weight of my inability to forgive. Or maybe it was already dead that morning I found the receipt, and I've just spent the last 2 years sitting vigil at its grave. Who is truly to blame when a house collapses? The one who knowingly cracks the foundation, or the one who can't figure out how to live safely in a broken home? I look at my life now, in this beautiful, silent house that feels more like a mausoleum. Our daughter Emily is packing her bags for college next year. The countdown is on. Josh will follow her 2 years after that. And then what? What is left when the buffers, our beautiful children, are gone? Just 2 strangers, rattling around in a museum of a life that used to be theirs, with nothing left to say. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when the silence is at its most deafening, I wonder if I should have left. If I should have raged and screamed and packed my bags and our children's bags that very first day? Would that clean, sharp break have been less painful than this slow, 2-year decay? This death by 1,000 paper cuts? But then I think of our kids, and our 17 years of shared history, and the ghost of the man I loved so fiercely. And I wonder, is there ever a right answer when everything has gone so irredeemably wrong? I think I threw him a lifeline of forgiveness, but maybe I was holding on to my end so tight, with so much anger and hurt, that I never actually let him grab it. So I sit here, with my cold morning coffee, and I think about all the other women, all the other people, who have sat exactly where I am, in the quiet wreckage of a life they thought was safe. What did you do? How do you know when it's time to stop trying to rebuild on a foundation that has turned to little more than dust? When do you finally find the courage to walk away? Not because you don't still love the man he was, but because you can no longer live with what he's become. Or, even harder, what you've become in the process. That's the question that keeps me awake at night. And the silence in this house never, ever gives me an answer.